Hey, hey, hey! It's time for another low-budget binge today. All right. From intellectually gothic art housers to Bigfoot documentaries, there's a whole lot of horrifying and downright unusual lo-fi chills and thrills in this week's low-budget binge grouping. Let's start binging. Welcome back to ML Miller Frights. I'm ML Miller. Before we begin, please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. Low Budget Binge is where we venture down the path less traveled and look at low budget, no budget, and sometimes international films that never get that top billing you see with the usual Hollywood fare. I'll indicate in the review down below where you can find these films along with their trailers. Here we go. The Skunk Ape Experiments, Episode 1, is new on-demand and digital download from Outcast Paranormal. It's directed by Stacy Brown Jr. A group of Bigfoot enthusiasts used various outside-of-the-box methods to track down the cryptid known as the skunk ape in the Florida Everglades in this, the first installment of a three-part docuseries. The Skunk Ape Experiments is a bold endeavor. We've all seen and grown quite tired of the usual Bigfoot shows where people trounce around in the dark using night vision and assuming every broken twig and strange sound is a cryptid. Stacy Brown Jr. and his crew of good old boys have gathered together to do just that, but because this is Florida, the terrain is quite perilous, filled with swamps, fierce gators, swarms of bees, wild boars, and all sorts of other critters that would just as soon kill you than run away. But these guys don't just stop there. While part of the hour-long documentary feels rather typical for a Bigfoot expedition, Brown and his jovial group of believers risk their health and souls for the cause. While one of the guys drops acid and attempts to communicate with other dimensions, another chants in the room below, in a house they rented in the middle of the woods, reading poetry from Aleister Crowley in order to get himself closer to the darker spirit world. There's also a spiritualist in another room attempting to contact the creature, and meanwhile, outside of the house, another group of guys are on the lookout for an appearance of the skunk ape itself. That's a whole lot of different angles to approach this thing, and while it might seem to be a bit of a stretch, since conventional methods haven't seemed to have produced any hard evidence of the creature, it doesn't hurt to try something unordinary. While I admire these guys, there's a sort of jackass feel to this documentary that you don't get with regular Bigfoot shows. It's one of those things where they tell the viewer not to do this at home, but the reckless fun they seem to be having might just influence the dimmer bulbs out there to try this dangerous shit. My biggest complaint with this first part of the series is that it cuts off as the rituals they are performing just get started. I know it wanted to end on a cliffhanger, but this first hour-long chapter felt incomplete, leaving me wanting to have some kind of closure. I guess it's a good thing that it left me wanting more. Before I researched this documentary, I didn't know there would be a second and third part, and really felt gypped by the whole thing. Knowing another installment will drop soon has me eager to check it out, and I'll keep you guys up to date if anything of interest comes from these zany Bigfooters who will try anything to prove the skunk ape is real. Infrared is new, streaming on Tubi. It's also available on demand and digital download from Terror Films. It's directed and written by Robert Livings and Randy Nundlall Jr. Wes, played by Jesse Jansen, is a paranormal investigator getting ready to film the first episode of his new paranormal reality series entitled Infrared, like the name of the movie. But what he doesn't know is that his producer has also cast Wes's sister, Izzy, played by Leah Finity, a powerful empath who has had a falling out with Wes a while back. On the first episode, Izzy and Wes reluctantly reunite to investigate a closed-down school with a dark past and rumored to be haunted. After the owner of the school, Jeff, played by Greg Sestero, agrees to open the school for the investigation, the cameras start rolling to capture all of the paranormal action. I'll give it to the filmmakers, Robert Livings and Randy Nundlall Jr. They go out of their way to make the footage feel genuinely found, keeping the edits light with no music or production done to them. This always leads to a much more authentic feeling film and works in making the viewer be that much closer to the action. That said, there are a whole lot of very tired found footage tropes going on with infrared. Namely, not a whole lot of action occurs until the last few minutes of the movie. There also are a few instances where some truly creepy stuff happens, but like most paranormal shows, it's just doors slightly moving or Izzy getting odd vibes. These lower level chills don't really feel fresh or new, and the over the top ending, which actually involves an interesting and unexpected twist, happens all too late and it's over all too soon. The thing that saves Infrared is the subplot of the damaged relationship between Wes and Izzy. Both actors, Jensen and Finity, are solid in their roles, commanding some pretty emotional scenes without feeling as if they are staged or forced. Their natural acting actually helped me invest in the film, despite the long moments between scares. Infrared left me conflicted. I think the acting was above par for most movies of this sort, and the story had some very interesting turns. That said, in terms of being an actually scary movie, it fails miserably. There are some decently constructed jump scares, but that's about it, and there just isn't enough creativity put into these scenes to leave a lasting or startling impression. Where's Rose is new on demand from TriCoast Worldwide. It's directed and written by John Mathis. Eric, played by Ty Simpkins, aka the kid no one knew who he was at Stark's funeral at the end of Avengers Endgame, is graduating high school and has a football scholarship for a decent school to start in the fall. On the night of his graduation party, his little sister Rose, played by Skylar Elise Philpott, goes missing in the woods. Eric doesn't know what happened, but when Rose is found, there's something different about her that Eric's parents don't notice. As Rose continues to exhibit some very creepy behavior, like eating worms, talking to shadows, and appears to have completely black eyes when she wants to, Eric becomes more concerned that something evil has taken Rose's place in the family. But the more he digs, Eric begins to discover the truth about what happened that fateful night. Where's Rose starts out as a rather milquetoast kind of movie. Eric is your all-American boy, hanging with his pals, going to keggers and prepping for college. Eric's family seems pretty basic as well, living an ideal life in an ideal home. But the longer Where's Rose goes on, the darker it gets until it finally reaches a pitch-black climax that is bound to shock you. It shocked me. I must admit I wasn't thinking much of this film at first, but the more the story unfolded, the more interested I became in how dark it was going to get. What started out as a movie of the week-style lame fest became so much more by the final reel. That said, Where's Rose takes its time to get to that interesting part. The concept of a child being taken and replaced by something supernatural is a well-tread path in horror. So much of Where's Rose felt like a big been-there-done-that burger. Eric, being the only one suspicious of Rose's replacement, calls for a routine of setting up numerous scenes where Eric is caught enraged at Rose by his parents and the neighbors, only for the little girl to act innocent and set up Eric for suspicion. It takes quite a while to get to where things start feeling original, and those with short attention and patience might check out before the getting starts getting good. I think those who power through the schmaltzy and predictable stuff will appreciate the reward at the end of Where's Rose. It's unconventional and tragic. Ty Simpkins is decent in the role, sporting some River Phoenix-like hair, but unfortunately not a lot of his acting chops. He works in this role, but doesn't stand out as anything exceptional. He spends most of the time simply acting like a distracted teenager, so there isn't a lot of opportunity to show a lot of range. Little Skylar Elise Philpott is decent too, but all she has to do is stand around and look sweet or sinister whenever it is required. While one might not seek out Where's Rose for its stellar thespian work, the actors serve the script fine, delivering quite a dastardly little tale wrapped in a very plain white wrapper. See this one for the unconventional conclusion. It's a very wicked one. Dawn Breaks Behind the Eyes is new on demand and digital download from Dark Sky Films. It's directed by Kevin Kopacka and written by Kevin Kopacka and Lili Villányi. Dawn Breaks Behind the Eyes tells two parallel stories, one of a young couple whose marriage is on the rocks entering a large mansion they inherited and plan on flipping for profit. The other follows a film crew that wraps a movie and has a wrap party to end all wrap parties in the same gothic mansion. In both stories, there seems to be something diabolical happening right beyond their purview. Dawn Breaks Behind the Eyes is a film more about the creative process than horror, though horror does play a big part in the story. It's about the process of making a film and how what one creates can often take a life of its own. It also touches upon the ethereal nature of the creative process and how creativity is ever evolving, often reflecting the situation the creative spirit finds within themselves. It's also about the setbacks a creative mind often encounters that continuously attempt to influence and warp whatever message one wishes to communicate to their own benefit. Anyone who has participated in the creative process and seen that process interrupted by outside forces will find something to empathize with in this heady little allegory. Dawn Breaks Behind the Eyes also contains an orgy, a vampire, a creepy mansion, and penis mutilation. So if you don't really feel like delving into the more intellectual themes at play, there's that for horror fans to look forward to. I don't know if Dawn Breaks Behind the Eyes succeeds in being as entertaining as it wants to be. It feels more like an interesting, highbrow TED Talk on the philosophies of creativity than anything else. While I appreciate the message it's trying to send, I do feel like there's a lack of humanity to this film. The characters in both stories feel disconnected from real life, more like symbols playing their part in an elaborate metaphor. And with this lack of humanity came my own difficulty really getting into this story. There are quite a few beautifully shot scenes. There's a slow-mo scene involving an inferno, some absolutely bizarre imagery, some interesting musical choices, and an overall fine eye for making every inch of this Gothic mansion all of the action takes place in look extravagant, unusual, bizarre, and otherworldly. Dawn Breaks Behind the Eyes is a succulent and stylistic movie to look at from beginning to end. Being a writer myself, I am always interested in stories about writing stories. Some of these revelations and plot points ask questions about the writing process, specifically the process of adapting writing to film, I found to be quite fascinating, and I'm glad these questions were raised and theorized upon. Still, the disconnectedness is prevalent all the way through Dawn Breaks Behind the Eyes. I'm glad I saw this film and appreciate what it's trying to communicate, but I hesitate to call it all entertaining and can't give it a wholehearted recommendation because of this. Hes Watching is new on demand and digital download. It's directed and written by Jacob Estes. A pair of kids, Iris Serena Estes, and Lucas, played by Lucas Steele Estes, are stuck at home alone during a worldwide pandemic with their parents out of the country. As the death toll rises, the kids begin to get cabin fever and start pulling pranks on each other. But soon they realize that there might be something dark and evil tormenting them while they sleep. Hes Watching is a low-budget found footage-esque film made by the Estes family during the pandemic. While much of the film is made with handheld phone cameras, it isn't a true found footager, as the film switches back and forth between first-person POV and a more omniscient traditional mode of camera work. There are also many dream and hallucination scenes that can't really be done via found footage either. So while there might be a lot of handheld cam going on, this really can't be considered found footage. At best, it's a multimedia experimental film utilizing many different cameras to tell one story. The handheld stuff does do its job, as there is a sense of jittery tension that occurs throughout Hes Watching. There are definitely some scenes that will unnerve you as the kids attempt to get to the bottom of who or what is stalking them in the night while they are sleeping. Through confessional-style setups, we also get some great characterization from both kids, who at first enjoy their freedom without parents, but soon begin to miss them and resent them for leaving them alone for so long. Eventually, they begin to believe that there really is a monster and try their best to battle it. I think. You see, things get really vague the longer this movie plays out. Between confessions and arguments between Iris and Lucas, they seem to enjoy making short movies, their absent father being a filmmaker and all. So much of Hes Watching is what some might call art house. Some scenes don't make sense, some are just meant to be disturbing, some are meant to be beautiful. These scenes are more like a montage of wild imagery that one might have seen back when MTV actually played videos. The longer the kids are alone with one another, the more surreal the imagery gets, and while I think I followed what occurs in the final moments of Hes Watching, there really is no way to be sure because even the conclusion isn't arrived at with much of a sense of reality. The imagery of the masked man who seems to be stalking the kids is quite horrifying, especially when he seems to appear out of nowhere. Is this a symbol of the kids' frayed minds, or is there really a benevolent beast after them? I'm not sure on that, really. All I know is that despite the vague way this one wraps up, Hes Watching was successful in unnerving me with strange images, surreal sequences, and a couple of kids who have a pretty strong screen presence despite their age. If you don't mind descents into vivid madness with nothing really to grip on by the time the equally creative credits roll, Hes Watching just might be your jam.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're doomed. Oh, you're doomed. You're